As well, MacArthur, okay, he even said that our greatest defense is our range, is our distance. So he didn't anticipate that the Japanese would be able to hit him all the way from Formosa. Kasi no, the Japanese sabi, they didn't have enough carriers and ganyan. His intelligence was a little bit faulty at that time. Okay. So these are the things na kasi lumalaki tayo ng tipong na tayo si MacArthur walang in action and things like that. You know, in fairness to the guy, talagang a lot of vilify. Pero yung our analysis among the historians sa isang circle namin, he had a nervous breakdown because war started at the time that he did not really anticipate.
Why was there a need to, parang tinatanong sa akin, I don't have the answer, kung bakit binomba ang Manila. I know babombahin yung Sangli, yung port. Pero why specifically Manila despite walang military, kung tama nga yung logic na yun?
Well, ito pa isang maling notion ng mga tao. The Japanese were not targeting Manila. They were targeting the port area. They were targeting ships in the mouth of the Pasig River because you have to understand, Engineer Island was at the mouth of the Pasig River and that time, it was a target. That's where yung mga Q-boats and dyan sinaservice yung ibang PT boats natin in Engineer Island. Ngayon, hindi mo na makita Engineer Island kasi nag-extend na yung but still there. So, when the Japanese bombed that area, syempre hindi mo na maiwasan. At that time, they were still using dumb bombs. No? Wala pa naman smart technology yun. So, some of the bombs actually fell in that side of Manila. Yan, sa may side ng Pasig Gorge, Intramuros. I think Santo Domingo Church was hit and things like that. But other than that, wala. The Japanese did not bomb the city itself. So the photos that you will see, okay, show me a photo of the actual city destroyed in December. Wala, hindi. It was intact. You have to remember, the Japanese were actually, interested to attack the military installations. Why? Because ayun yung mga kalaban nila Ayun yung importante. They're not there to bomb the city. They're actually there to bomb, let's say, Clark. They're there to bomb Nichols Field. Okay, they're there to bomb Batangas. They're there to bomb any installation that will impede their advance. Not the city itself. They need the city, but mobobombahin.
One major aspect of the war, we're now in 1942 and yung War Plan Orange ba yun? Yung ginawa. So MacArthur said, we go to Bataan, we defend that place, and the purpose was to delay the Japanese from moving towards Southeast Asia. So ano ang myth regarding Bataan that we should know?
Okay. So first of all, it's good you talked about War Plan Orange, because the original plan muna was for MacArthur and the well-trained Philippine Army, which was not yet well-trained at that. Kasi nga, April ang gusto niya, di ba? So he said that by April of 42, I can hold the Japanese in the beaches. But war happened in December, di ba? In fact, prior to that, some American officers, and this is recorded in the documents, when Wainwright was actually inspecting some positions in Lingayen, in Pangasinan, ganyan, because that is actually the anticipated route of the Japanese. Ang sad part is that the Japanese landed on the La Union side, not on the Pangasinan side.
Following a carefully timed plan that called for landings at 3 different locations along a 24-kilometer stretch of the Gulf, the first wave of Japanese landing craft approached the beaches at 0500.
So when Wainwright and some of his senior officers were inspecting, sabi nila isang colonel doon, sabi, ito yung mga kanyon namin, naka-ready na. We have these big guns, 155s, and there are only about 2 of them in the Gupan, and some of artillery. The first question was that, how soon can you pull them out? How fast can you pull them out of that position? So, ibig sabihin nun that they were already anticipating a retreat even before the invasion started. And the biggest problem they had was their supply train. Not the train tracks. Well, they use the train. Pero when you say supply train is how to supply logistically all these troops. Okay? Tandaan mo to, a lot of the depots were still in Manila. So how do you supply yung depots mo? You're talking here of a good almost 200 miles or 200 kilometers to Lingayen. If the Japanese would bomb these train stations or these rails, that's a big problem. We didn't have too much trucks. And mobility, yes. Okay. So some of his planners anticipated. So that's why sinabi nga, how fast can you pull them out? So ibig sabihin, they were not there to stay. So ibig sabihin, pag dumating ang kalaban, balik tayo. I'll talk about bago tayo umabot ng Bataan kasi that's very, very important eh. So imagine this, the North Luzon force had to withdraw. They had 5 defense lines that they were there to not to stop or to stay, pero only to hold until such time that the troops from the South Luzon would converge and make their way to Bataan. So that's why the crucial part there was Kalumpit Bridge, because that would be their gateway so they could swing and turn left from San Fernando and papunta na silang Bataan. So those defense lines, as the Japanese were advancing down mainland Luzon, northern Luzon, they had to be held enough to the point just to delay them, not to fight with them to the death. So unti-unti silang umaatras. In fact, the D4 line was abandoned. They actually went straight to the D5 line. Nung nakatawid na yung South Luzon Force at Kalumpit on January 1, Wainwright ordered the Kalumpit Bridge, 2 bridges, the land bridge and the railway bridge, to be blown up. Okay, because the Japanese were just about a good 5 kilometers away, chasing them. Okay, and some of them actually coming from Baliwag. And you know, a tank battle happened pa in Baliwag. When they swung, nung nakadaan na sila up to Route 7, which is San Fernando na yan, and go to Bataan, ayun, medyo nakahinga na sila Wainwright. And then from then on, they actually had 2 engagements. Yung Guagua Porac line na yan, okay? That was had to be held at all costs para makapasok na yung the rest of the USAFE forces to Layak Junction. So there was a heavy artillery duel between the USAFE troops and the Japanese at the Guagua Porac line. Diyan nga sumikat si General Kapinpin, si Mateo Kapinpin. He uttered the words, "Hold the line or die where you are." Kasi we really need to hold this ground. So there were actually exciting, I don't call exciting, pero mga close calls, no? For example, when the 11th Division was evacuated by railway, by train, okay? They actually made it to Moncada, that Tarlac, okay? A scant 11 minutes before the Japanese arrived. Oh. Timing lang talaga, oh. So ganun rin kabilis sila mag-retreat and proficiently. In fact, we lost a number of material, including some trucks and tanks, when a premature bridge was blown in Tarlac. So inabandon yun, iniwan yun. And the Japanese actually have a documentation of what they actually captured. Now, start tayo sa isang myth, yung Battle of Layak Junction. Okay. So, yes, Layak Junction had to be held, okay, to delay the Japanese. Okay. Now, there was, kung pupunta kang Bataan, makita mo, di ba, there's this big statue, Battle of Layak Junction. Ang nangyari doon, walang defense line. No? The defense lines were even deeper. What happened there was an artillery barrage was laid by the defending troops because the Japanese were actually advancing that road. And it's actually a myth. There was technically no battle at Layak Junction. But the reason why Layak Junction was immortalized was because si Sergeant Calugas won his Congressional Medal of Honor firing his artillery at Layak Junction. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, by the US. Okay. He was pinned post-war. In the first part of the war, MacArthur, with the propaganda, tandaan mo to, we needed heroes. So he actually pinned an award to Villamor and si Randy Keetor. Now, Randy Keetor is credited to be the first American pilot to shoot down a Japanese plane over the Philippines on December 8, over Mount Pinatubo. In fact, he even went to the crash site of his plane to confirm his skill. Now, si Villamor, well, that's another story to be told. So, baka maraming magalit sa akin about his famous skills. But you have to remember, we needed heroes at that time in the early part of it. Talo tayo eh. So, in order to inspire the troops, they had to award Villamor, Randy Keetor. In fact, even Colin Kelly, the famous B-17 pilot, who claimed to have sunk a Japanese battleship, okay, didn't really sink a battleship at all. No, yeah, in Lingayen. Actually, up north. I think it's in Apari or something like that.
We are the same.
Okay, anyway, going back to Bataan. So nung nakapasok na, the first line of defense in Bataan was the Morong Abukay line. Yan, sa Abukay na. Diba? But the problem was, it was not a straight physical line. Okay? Kasi if you look at the maps and drawings, kala mo, linya. But actually, the troops were not really seeing eye to eye with each other. Diba? Kasi the trench, ito pa isang myth. Akala kasi ng mga tao, yung trench, isang mahabang linya yan. Parang World War I. Hindi. These trenches actually like 3-man foxholes or even 5-man foxholes. Na nakakakitaan lang sila.
Short, para siyang dots.
Para siyang dots. Hindi siya straight line talaga.
Kung napanood yung movie na 1917, yung trenches ng mga both Germans, trenches ng mga British at saka mga Germans, isang straight line na ganun. And I think pati yung Spanish-American War, ganun na yata. Trincheras. Pero, ito kasi, lalo na, pag nakita mo yung geography ng Bataan, is pag ganun, with deep rivers, hindi mababaw na rivers, kaya parang imposible ka talaga makadiretso. Kahit mag-drive ka mula dinalupihan ka, samat talagang gaganong-ganong ka
That is right. And you have to note that the first defense line, yung Morong Abukay line, actually had Mount Natib in the middle. So, even pre-war, they actually sent scouts, Philippine scouts na to, to actually navigate Mount Natib. Alam mo na wala sila. Even the 14th Engineer Battalion sent a platoon. This was pre-war, hindi sila nakatawid. Ganun ka, it's the mountain was so big, and heavily forested. And so there was a mountain in between, di ba? But to the surprise of everybody, the Japanese sent the 9th Infantry Regiment of the 16th Division actually sent a party. Sila nakapenetrate yung mga Hapon. So that's why the line had to be abandoned later on. So there are a few there were skirmishes. The first Battle of Bataan. Yan yan, tinatawag first Battle of Bataan. So si 65th Brigade, si Colonel Imay had actually 3 regiments. No? Now the other thing you have to know, when the Japanese landed in the Philippines, they had 2 main divisions. The 48th Division, which actually had 2 regiments of Formosans. The first Formosan and the second Formosan regiment. So officered by Japanese, NCOs Japanese, but a lot of their foot soldiers were Formosans, mga Taiwanese we call them today. And then you had the 47 Infantry Regiment, which was all Japanese. And then they're actually a good division. Pero despite them being called a motorized division, kasi when you term the motorized, ibig sabihin may mga trucks na yan. Nakabisikleta pa rin yung iba. So that they were coined the term the bicycle division.
Bicycle, bicycle, bicycle. I want to ride my bicycle.
Because they had, I think, for every regiment, 1 battalion would be moving on bicycles. So, daming bisikleta nun. And then the 16th Division was to land in the south. By the time the Bataan campaign was supposed to start, the 48th Division was pulled out of the Philippines. It was sent to the Dutch East Indies at the time. The Netherlands East Indies was to the Indonesia today. They were pulled out and sent elsewhere. Because sabi nga, Homa was only given a timetable of 60 days to conquer the entire Philippines. First week of December.
Last week of January, tapos na.
Dapat by the first week of January, medyo his objective was to capture Manila. But the other thing is, the Japanese thought if they captured Manila, tapos na. Hindi nila alam that, the MacArthur had to wiggle his way all the way to Bataan. And the Japanese had every opportunity to prevent the Bataan campaign. Yes, because they did not bomb the bridges and the roads actually leading to Bata. Yes. So akala nila, in fact, ito pa. So it's a failure of intelligence on both sides. Well, let's not say failure. What do you call this? Yung parang yung misstep or yung oversight. It's more of an oversight. Yes, they anticipate. Okay. So, ang akala ng Hapon ngayon, na High Command, mapping operation ka na lang. So, they sent actually a garrison detachment unit, no? So, one of them was the 65th Brigade. It's really just a brigade, of about 7,000 men lang at the maximum na yun. And they were supposed to arrive in the Philippines mga mid-January pa. But sa sobrang excitement ng mga Hapon, mapping up na to, yan. So December 30, dumanding na sila sa Lingayen. Now, the biggest problem they had was kulang sila sa transport. Ano ba, they had to march from Lingayen all the way to Bataan. So by the time the Bataan campaign started, these troops from the 65th Brigade were all exhausted, footsore.
Just to give you kung gaano kalayo ang Lingayen hanggang Bataan. Nag-work na kasi ako sa Kalasyaw, Dagupan area. Yung mula doon pa lang, hanggang Tarlac pa lang, ang layo na, 1 oras na yun, nakabas pa ako noon.
Kung may truckman, uunahin supplies nila. Di ba? Oo, tili, oo. Yung mga, but foot soldiers, di malakad kayo. I have pictures to show actually na yung 65th Brigade. By the time they arrived in Bataan, pagod na sila. Okay? And they have to fight. Okay, so anyway. So, ito yung mga small thing kasi a lot of people were saying, dumating ang Hapon, ang dami-dami nila. As in, even in MacArthur's, there are more than 100,000 Japanese that landed. Technically, there are only 43,000 that landed in Lingayen. Total na yun, Tapos magsasabi, mga Pilipino, ilan kukonti? Hindi, we had almost 80,000 men in Bataan. Okay, but of course, halo-halo yun, service command, foot soldiers. Okay, so I'll go into that later. Anyway, so at the start of the battle, you have untrained troops on one side, you have a tired Japanese army attacking on one side. But it was war, di ba? So, and then, the Filipinos actually repulsed the Japanese several times, especially in the east side. So, yung Battle of Abukay, was really heavy fighting. And then the scouts were actually the ones who really saved the day, mga Philippine scouts. Of course, there were Philippine army troops that, Oh yeah, that's another thing, by the way. You have to have a distinction between the Philippine Army and the Philippine Scouts. Okay? They were different. One was a Filipino contingent, for the Philippine government, which is the Philippine Army. Yeah, but the Philippine Scouts were actually under the U.S. Army. So, you have to note na akala kasi ng iba na lahat kami USAPE, lahat kami pantay. No, sorry to say, it's different. Okay? So the scouts were actually armed with US gear. They were dressed just like an American. And then, of course, the other things that people are starting just to learn is that the use of the garans, the first use of the garans in any war was in the Philippines. So the scouts were actually armed with M1 garans. Okay? Kasi iba, dumating lang yung garan dito, liberation na eh. No, we had early garans here in the Philippines. And then, you have to take note, the scouts were very, very proficient with the use of that rifle. During the Battle of Abukay, okay, especially in a place called Mabatang, Barrio Mabatang, that was held by the scouts. So, the Japanese would always like to attack at night. And you know why? It's because they want to take advantage. Kasi ganito yan eh. The greatest weapon that the Americans and the USAPE in Bataan had was artillery. That was their greatest weapon. Not machine guns, not rifle. It was artillery. The Japanese feared US artillery, USAPE artillery, very much. Okay, anyway. So they attacked at night, usually, di ba? So ang gagawin ng Hapon, they would have firecrackers. Yung parang sinturon ni Judas, pero maliliit lang. That actually sounded like their own rifles nila. So they would actually throw that. Some Japanese would try to infiltrate at the rear, blow up those firecrackers. Para siyempre yung mga Pilipino, pag nagugulat, marireveal yung position, so the Japanese would know where to attack. So that one attack in Abukay, so it would be ang prelude nun would either be like the firecrackers, and then you will hear a whistle. And then the famous Bansai. Gano'n, di ba? So when the Japanese wave started attacking, the scouts actually had what they call this fire discipline. Okay. They started banging away with their M1s. The fire was so great kasi automatic siya. Akala ng Japanese na grabe itong mga ito, ang dami nilang machine gun. But because the volume of fire was so great, ano kayo mga tama ng mga Hapon? In fact, in the diary of one of these Japanese guys, there was actually a lieutenant that was hit. Na feeling nila VIP yung lieutenant na yun eh. So, the commander, I think the battalion commander, actually sent 3 or 5 men to retrieve the lieutenant. Sabi kasi might be wounded, but yung tatlong yung patay. Kaka-retrieve, patay raw. I mean, two got headshots. Gabi yun. So, ano na yun, basta may, if masiluwet lang, yun, the scouts would put out shoot. And then later on, the Japanese found what they call a gap. Yung nga, after the 9th Infantry penetrated Mount Nativ, na-outflank ngayon yung sa east. So they had to withdraw. And then on the west side naman, yung the famous last charge of the cavalry. Yes, I mean, it's always been mentioned that one of the last cavalry charges on horse was actually in Bataan. I know some historians in Bataan who are actually trying to tell the story to the locals, which is good. Kailangan eh. Kasi the fighting was actually near the church eh. Pero of course, yung roads right now, iba na, dami ng bahay, di ba? Sementado na. But yeah, it was recorded. But for the Japanese naman, when I was trying to look on their side, it was just actually a skirmish. Di ba? Kung skirmish lang eh. Kasi the scouts didn't last. They have to retreat eh. They have to retreat to Morong, to Bayandati, because the utos was fallback na tayo. And in fact, during the fallback, masaklap doon, the first regular division, Philippine Army, one of the trained better and Predator divisions, kasi they were pre-war, nandun na sila eh. The first regular division, commanded by General Fidel II, was actually cut off. So in fact, some of them had to wade by the shore. Eh rocky yung iba doon, beaches doon.